I still remember the sound before I remember the rage. The metallic scream of excavator teeth tearing into soil that had held my family together for more than a century. The ground shaking beneath my boots, as if the land itself was trying to recoil. And then I saw it. Wooden markers splintering, stone slabs cracking, the shallow rise where my grandparents were buried collapsing into a trench meant for a luxury water pipeline. And in that moment my vision narrowed, my chest locked, blood rushed to my ears so loudly I could barely hear myself shout. Standing a few yards away, perfectly untouched by the dust and destruction, was Diana Blackthorne, president of the Silvercrest Ridge Homeowners Association, designer sunglasses catching the light, lips curved in a smile so casual it felt rehearsed, like this was just another inconvenience she'd already decided I would lose. And when I demanded she stop, demanded she explain how anyone thought this was acceptable, she waved a folded document in front of me and said, almost bored, that my ranch was merely an obstacle to progress, that history had to make room for modern living, that sentimentality didn't hold permits. What she didn't know, what she couldn't have known while she stood there watching 4 generations of Hale family graves being reduced to rubble, was that I was about to uncover one single thing, buried deeper than any pipeline, that could turn her multi-million-dollar development into a sun-scorched liability overnight. So before I tell you how every swimming pool, fountain, and emerald golf fairway in Silvercrest Ridge went bone dry, before I explain how executives who laughed at me ended up begging for water they never owned, tell me where you're watching from. Because this wasn't just revenge, this was about land, blood, and a promise I made to the dead. My family ranch, Hale Crossing, sat on 200 acres in Redwood Vale, land so fertile my grandfather used to say it breathed back when you turned the soil, rolling hills that caught the sunrise just right, creeks that never fully ran dry even during the worst droughts, a place built from nothing by hands that refused to quit, then protected by my father through recessions, crop failures, and the slow death of rural America. I wasn't supposed to come back here, not with a law degree, not with a corner office in the city, not with a future that looked clean and predictable on paper. But when my father passed, something heavier than ambition pulled me home. Maybe the memory of him standing on the porch at dusk telling me land was the only thing they weren't making more of. Maybe guilt, maybe love, probably all 3 tangled together. For 3 years I rebuilt Hale Crossing quietly, small-scale livestock, sustainable crops, farm-to-table contracts with local restaurants, not flashy, not rich, but honest, something my father would have recognized. Then the letter arrived. Official letterhead, cold legal language, informing me that Silvercrest Ridge HOA would be exercising a right-of-way to install a water pipeline through the eastern edge of my land. As if that strip of soil hadn't fed my family for generations. As if my livelihood was just a line on a map. I called the county, got a clerk who sounded half asleep, told me permits were approved, public notice had been given, everything was in order, and I knew right then something was wrong. Because no notice had ever reached me, not certified, not posted, not whispered. That's when Diana Blackthorne officially entered my life. The Silvercrest Development Office looked like a glass monument to arrogance. All steel and sunlight, completely out of place against the valley it was consuming. And when I showed up unannounced, they told me to make an appointment for next week. So I left my card with a note that said today would be better. 2 hours later my phone rang, her voice smooth, pleasant, iced with control, suggesting coffee, suggesting discussion, suggesting she already knew I was outmatched. I didn't sleep that night. I read county codes until dawn, flagged 17 violations before my coffee went cold, and when she arrived late the next morning, dressed like the meeting was beneath her, she talked to me like I was a child clinging to nostalgia, told me permits were signed by Mayor Carlton Reeves, told me progress didn't wait, then slid a check across the table. More money than my ranch had ever been worth on paper. Payment for an easement, not ownership, just silence. I left the check behind. After that, doors closed fast. Every law firm cited conflicts they wouldn't explain. Every neighbor meeting ended with the same defeated shrug. They'd already sold options, already taken money, already convinced themselves resistance was pointless. When the construction crews arrived, even the sheriff looked ashamed, telling me permits seemed valid, that interference meant arrest, and when Diana Blackthorne stepped out of her black SUV, she smiled again. told me I'd chosen the difficult path, then watched as machines tore through the field where my great-grandfather planted his first wheat. That night, with dust hanging in the sunset like smoke, I remembered my father's voice, low, firm, burned into memory. Never let anyone touch the water, son. It's the lifeblood of this valley. I couldn't sleep, so I opened his old office, files untouched since his funeral. And that's where history cracked open, yellow documents from the 1954 drought, water rights that didn't just cover our land but the entire northern watershed, and an old photograph, my father standing beside a well, handwritten on the back, Hearing versus D. Blackthorne, 1987. That name wasn't new. With those papers I went to Margaret Ellison, the town historian, 70 years old, sharp as broken glass, and when she spread the valley map across her table, her smile told me everything before she said it. This wasn't just a water right, she said. This was the water right. My grandfather had secured the source, built the original well, the central system every modern pipeline fed into, and the master valve, forgotten, ignored, sat on my land, meaning Silvercrest Ridge didn't just cross my property, it depended on it. She told me about the 1980s, about Diana Blackthorne as a drilling executive, about my father standing in hearings warning of contamination, about her losing, vowing to return, waiting for him to die. This wasn't development. This was revenge with permits. Everything escalated after that. Intimidation, smear campaigns, fences cut, suppliers pressured, my sister Rebecca Hale flying in from Chicago and turning my kitchen into a war room, reframing the story from stubborn rancher to family defending a watershed, while my friend Lucas Grant, calling from South America, confirmed what the documents already screamed. The rights were ironclad, with one clause buried like a landmine. The reclamation clause. If the water was abused, endangered, or misused, control could be physically reclaimed. Then came Daniel Mercer, the lead engineer, meeting me under a bridge at night, handing over a USB drive filled with violations, shallow pipes, falsified reports, contamination warnings buried, consulting fees paid to Mayor Reeves, proof the development's water demands exceeded sustainable limits, proof that everything depended on my land. When Diana Blackthorne laughed in my face during our final meeting, called the rights dormant, dismissed history as quaint, I knew she thought she'd already won. So I waited. Memorial Day weekend, 98 degrees, Silvercrest Ridge unveiling its dream to investors, fountains dancing, pools shimmering, speeches echoing optimism. And at exactly 3 o'clock, standing in a rusted pump house my grandfather built, I turned the wheel. The pressure dropped immediately. Fountains died mid-sentence. Sprinklers hissed and stopped. Pools drained into silence. Her call came seconds later, voice cracking, demanding answers, and I recited the law calmly, exercised my right, cited environmental abuse, misuse of resources, pending review. She tried to retaliate, sent private security to break the valve, but cameras caught everything. Live streams spread faster than influence, and by the time deputies arrived, the story was already public. Investigations followed, bribes exposed, permits revoked, courts stepped in, judges from outside the county ruled the system unauthorized, ordered it dismantled, forced public apologies, and Diana Blackthorne disappeared from public life. Her house listed quietly, her power gone. A new HOA board came to me humbled, agreed to rebuild properly, to conserve, to share responsibly, to respect land they never bothered to understand, and water returned under terms that protected everyone, not just those who could afford influence. Months later, standing on my porch watching a conservation sign go up bearing my father's name, I felt something close to peace, knowing I hadn't just defended property, I'd honored a promise. So here's the question I leave you with, because it isn't simple. If you held the power to cut off luxury to protect something sacred, would you turn the valve, or would you let entitlement keep flowing just because it was easier? Where do you draw the line between justice and revenge?